Hello and welcome to The Caring View, the online social care chat show bringing topics and platforms to voices all around the country. You will notice tonight I am on my own without Mark. Mark is off going to see some famous singer, I'm led to believe. My playlist consists of Dolly Parton, Joni Mitchell, Janis Joplin, so you can imagine that I have no idea who any of the newer music crazes are nowadays. But this evening I am joined by the Miss Menopause herself, Sharon MacArthur. So, hello, Sharon.
Hello.
How are you? Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm marvellous. Yes, I'm Sharon MacArthur. My company name is Miss Menopause. But honestly, Adam, I answer to anything. And I do have situations now where people come up to me in the street and go, Miss Menopause. I go, okay, I'll answer to that. But my name is Sharon. So there you go. So I'm delighted to be here. So thanks for having me.
You're most welcome. You're most welcome. It's going to be a bit of an intimate episode. This, a bit of an intimate show. So before we get started, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and that bell if you are watching on YouTube. If you're on any of our social medias, give us a like, give us a follow and a share. And same if you're listening to this back on podcast, make sure you like, share, and give us a follow. So the views that I will be expressing tonight are of my own and the companies I represent. Sharon, you are the menopause person of the country, so I'm pretty sure you will be representing Miss Menopause as you speak. And if you've got any questions, pop them in the comments. I'll be monitoring the chat as we go along. So, Sharon, this part of the episode of the show, we usually talk about the news and what's going on in the world of social care. Tonight, I thought we would talk about an article that's come out recently. Well, I say it's an article. It's something that's developed, hasn't it? There's been a serious shortage protocol applied to HRT medication. Women are only allowed to access up to 3 months of medication, and there are real concerns that after that 3-month period is up, they may not be able to access anymore. So, how serious is this? And for those listening who aren't, fully aware, what is HRT and why is it important?
Well, it's hormone replacement therapy, and it comes in many different formats: patches, gels, sprays, tablets. Sadly, it's estimated less than 10% of women who could potentially take it are taking it. So it's not really, really, really popular. The good news is because more chat has been happening over menopause over the last few years. I mean, I set up Miss Menopause over 4 years ago now, and let me tell you, nobody wanted to talk to me about it then. So the good news is more and more people are getting to understand about HRT, the benefits that it can have, and why they might want to take it. And because of that, well, I say the truth is out there, like Mulder and Scully. You hear that it's because more people want it, so there's a bigger requirement for it. You also hear Brexit being put into the mix, and nobody really seems to know the truth. There's lots of different versions of it. But we were talking earlier, weren't we? So over 2 years ago now, I ended up on national TV talking about exactly the same thing. So I'm on something called HRT patches, so transdermal patches. And there was a huge stock shortage of those patches. And it got so bad, I was like shopping online in like Germany and Poland. I felt like a criminal trying desperately to find these HRT patches. And even, we'd be trading with, if I knew people would be saying, have you got any spare? Have you got any spare? And that's how bad it is. But what's happened this time is, so it's not patches that are out of stock. There's something called gel. So HRT gel, I won't quote the name. But what's happening is because that's now was out of stock, they're saying it's a manufacturing issue, they were caught unawares. Now, obviously, then doctors go, well, we've got this other type of gel, we'll prescribe you that instead. So that's now going out of stock. So we've got this domino effect. And then, of course, if gels go out of stock, they'll probably move on to patches, and then patches will be out of stock. So you've got loads of angry, terrified women out there who are really, really worried that they're going to have their medication taken away. Now, what I say about my HRT, just to give some insight, is my HRT, as I would say in some respects, has saved my life, and other women would absolutely say the same thing. So the thought of not having my HRT, which enables me just to be the me that I want to be every day, the me that I was before this whole menopause thing began, is totally and utterly terrifying. And I know that I couldn't do the work that I do without it. That's how bad it is. So imagine, missing any kind of drugs for diabetes, or missing drugs for cancer treatments, or whatever anyone's condition is, and then worrying now that you might not be able to get them. Like, how bad would that be?
It's it's terrifying, and I come from the LGBT community, and
Hmm.
I have friends who rely on PrEP and
Hmm.
other medications to make sure that they
Sure.
can live a normal and happy life,
Yeah.
and even HIV medication. We're very lucky in this country to have the NHS.
Yeah.
I had a friend in America that when Trump took into power, his medication stopped. He couldn't access it anymore. So I can't imagine what it must be like to have that lifeline taken away from you. Is there anything that women can use homeopathically? Is there anything that is proven to at least aid or benefit the reduction of symptoms of menopause?
Mm, the thing is, Adam, we're all like, I say, we're like menopausal women are like live living experiments. So what works for me really beautifully might never work for another person, and vice versa. And that's what makes it really, really difficult. So each and every person out there will ultimately have a menopause like themselves. So for me, it took me 18 months of trial and error to eventually get and find my HRT, because I tried magnesium. I tried magnesium sprays. I was bathing in this stuff. I was spraying it all over. I thought it was going to be a miracle cure because I just couldn't sleep. One of my most untenable symptoms was my inability to remain asleep. So, like many women, when my first symptoms began, I just thought, I'll just get on with it. This is what you hear all the time. I'm just getting on with it. And so, over 18 months of trial and error, nothing really touched the sides. And I'm sure I'll talk about more of that this evening. So eventually, when I did decide, well, why don't you try HRT, Sharon? I was really, really fortunate that within 2 weeks, all of my symptoms went. So why on earth would I want to even go back and faff around and go through any more trial and error to find something that after 18 months absolutely seemed to be, my, what I call my silver bullet, the thing that absolutely has just solved all of my menopause problems. And, I'm hearing horror stories. I run a Facebook group with over 6,500 women in there. And women are being swapped, out of good faith because the stuff they need isn't there. And instantly, it may not work for you. It may not be suitable for for yourself, the way you're made, the symptoms that you had, because we're all absolutely different. So just because my HRT worked within 2 weeks, another person will get exactly the same dose, the same brand. They will try it and they might say, it's really been not great for me at all. And that's what makes it really, really difficult. So if you believe you found your silver bullet, your thing that absolutely works for you, and it took you maybe months to get there, the last thing that you want to do is give that up for any reason. But that's what's happening because of these outages with stock.
Yeah,
And
I think it's they have mentioned, I think 29th of July is when the SSP is in place too. I always love it when they put dates on things, like they miraculously know that the crisis is going to be over. And this is me with my tinfoil hat on, and this is why I have
yeah,
to say at the beginning of the show, Sharon, that the views are mine and no one else's. I do
yeah,
wonder whether the pharmacies play their hands in this, the pharmaceutical companies, to drive prices up. There's
perhaps.
something that's a little odd. But I have just popped in Miss Menopause's Facebook group link into the chat. So anyone who is interested in joining in on the conversation on Miss Menopause, the link is there on the YouTube video. Apologies if you're listening to this on podcast or on Facebook. Head over to our YouTube page, you will find it there. So we keep using the M word, menopause, and I was always a believer that this has to be a conversation about women, for women, with women.
Mm-hmm.
And we were discussing earlier on, weren't we, that actually it affects everybody.
Yeah.
And if I'm an employer, I need to be fully apprised of what the menopause is and how I can support people. So, what is the menopause,
What
Sharon?
is the menopause? Oh my goodness. Well, what isn't the menopause? Well, the menopause, again, in my own words, in my own straight talking way, is a life event that's going to happen to 100% of reproducing females, whether they like it or not. So it's not like if you win a few spare million on the lottery where you might think, do you know what? I'd like to opt out of that menopause thing. I would say to women on calls, and certainly younger women, coming to a body near you at some point, whether you like it or not. So it's one thing that you can be certain that, if you're a reproducing female, you will ultimately go through the menopause. And the other thing to make note of is 100% of those reproducing females may not become parents. Now, I'm going to use myself in that example because I distinctly remember having a conversation with my nana in her backyard when I was about 14. And she must have been asking me about the family that I was going to have when I was older. And I distinctly remember saying, oh, Nana, I'm not going to have any children. And her direct response to me, Adam, was, who's going to look after you when you're old? Well, let me tell you, I thought anybody who was 50 years old or older was really, really old. Now, at the age of nearly 54, let me tell you, I think they're very, very young and vibrant. So when I looked at my Nana, I thought, oh, my goodness, she's very, very old. And the scary thing is she's younger than I am now. And let me tell you, she looked old at that point. So the point was, my body, my choice. I knew growing up that it was at my, that was not a route I was going to take, or in my mind at a young age, that was what I decided. So I knew I wasn't going to suffer from things like postnatal depression, postpartum psychosis, or anything linked to hormones because of pregnancy. And in my utter ignorance, I truly believed, I guess, now on reflection, that whatever that menopause thing was, it wasn't going to happen to me because I haven't shaken my hormones up through pregnancy. And all I can tell you is menopause nearly killed me because I fell asleep at the wheel of my car when I was driving at speed. That's how bad my menopause was. So menopause is a life event that's going to happen to 100% of reproducing females. It is going to be unique to each and every person. And that's what makes it really, really, really difficult. So I say menopausal women are like live living experiments. And what might work for me might never work for another person and vice versa. So that's what it is. So you don't know when it will happen. So statistically, if you were to read, they're called NICE guidelines in the UK. So doctors are issued with NICE guidelines that they got in November 2015, not that long ago, really. And what NICE guidelines say is anyone 45 and above is within the normal range of menopause. The average age for menopause in the UK is quoted as being 51. But, most women I've encountered, myself included, I've done a lot of continued professional development on this subject. I'm reading and researching all of the time. Most women are certainly going to begin menopause in their 40s, usually 45 and above. But we've also got this statistic of early menopause. And it's estimated, I think you said 5%. And I said, well, 1 in 100. Whatever it is, that's a lot of humans who are going to go through menopause. So I suppose we've got to get away from this idea that this is my least favorite phrase, Adam, women of a certain age. I'm like, oh my goodness. Do you even know what that means? This women of a certain age thing. So statistically and technically, menopause could happen to anybody at any age. And the saddest case I've ever read about, I'm going to call her a young girl, was of 12. Now, obviously, that's exceptional. But technically, it could happen at any point. So most women will encounter at some point in their mid-40s. But there are women who will go through early menopause. There's this other medical term, POI, stands for premature ovarian insufficiency. Trips off the tongue beautifully, don't you think? Not a particular kind medical term. And the most common reasons that women tend to encounter early menopause, usually under the age of 45 and under the age of 40, can be what I'll call chemical and medical reasons. So you might have friends, family, colleagues who are not only waiting to have some major surgeries, things like hysterectomies, which sadly are all too common these days, and sadly also things like cancer treatment. So what that means for those individuals who not only are they maybe worried, concerned and anxious about the procedures they're about to have, literally for some of them, literally the day after, they're going to wake up in a full-scale menopause. And so their hormones, those individuals' hormones have literally dropped off a cliff overnight. That's what's happened to them. So they haven't had months or maybe years to get used to the idea. It's literally happened to them overnight. And I met a woman about 3 years ago now, and she was going in for a full hysterectomy. I thought she was really, really smart. And she decided to get all of her literature. She was reading through it. And she said, she said, Sharon, I couldn't have even called it a paragraph. It was like a sentence. And it just kind of said menopause. And she thought, well, what's all that about? Haven't got a clue. So she went back to her medical team and ended up speaking to a surgeon. Happened to be a he. It could have been anybody. And she said, menopause. And this was his response. He went, oh, yes, don't worry. He went, that's a couple of hot flushes and you'll be done. This poor woman described it when she woke up. In her words, she thought she was dying, Adam, because she was literally overwhelmed with symptoms. That's how bad it was. But that's the thing, no one person. I was running a session a couple of weeks ago and I had somebody on the call who was quite irate. She went, Sharon, are you telling me my doctor's lied? I went, why? What's your doctor said? She said, my doctor said my symptoms will only last 2 years. Is he lying? I said, well, I'm not being funny, but the last person on this planet to know how long your menopause symptoms might last if you encounter them is you. And not one other single human out there can tell you how long and what sort of symptoms you will have, because each and every person will have a menopause like themselves. So on average, so it's estimated that women are living, well, we know that we're living into our early 80s now, which is a fantastic statistic to hear. Because if you wind back over 100 years ago now, we were living on average, men till they were about 47, and women sadly only till they were 50, so not much better. So most women over 100 years ago would never have even maybe lived long enough, sadly, to have encountered a menopause. And now, because we're living into our early 80s, you know, better healthcare, better nutrition, better housing, etc., we're living on average into our early 80s. So what that means is, statistically, many women could find that they're living in this menopausal state. And I think personally, we've got a PR problem. So again, all my views are my own, because it's called menopause. Now, I think it should be called menostop, because it indicates that your fertility might come back. Pause. Let me tell you, it's not coming back. So women could be living up to a third of their lives in a menopausal state. So that's a big chunk of somebody's lifetime, isn't it? And so the sad thing is that certainly right now, when things are getting slowly better, but most women have no idea that what is happening to their minds and their bodies is menopause related, because nobody's told us. Nobody's told us at all. So the saddest things that women say to me on a daily basis is this: I thought I had early onset Alzheimer's. That practically somebody every day says that's what I thought was happening to me. And the other really sad statistic is they say that they felt so alone and isolated. So what I've called it is the 100% club. So what I'm saying is 100% of reproducing females are going to go through this life event, whether they like it or not. You don't have a choice. I just want to also touch briefly upon our trans community. And what I want to say is every single person will have a menopause like themselves. That's the first thing. I've already said that, remember. So for example, from a trans man's point of view, depending on the surgeries and the hormones that individual elects to take or have, they still could technically go through menopause. And we've heard of trans men having children in the media over the years. And whilst a trans woman can't technically go through the menopause in the same way, depending on the surgeries and the hormones that individual elects to take or have, they could encounter very, very similar symptoms to that of menopause. So, but going back to my initial statement, each and every person will have a menopause like themselves. And that's what makes it really, really hard. Because how on earth are you supposed to know that what's happening to your mind and your body could be menopause related? And the other quite disturbing thing is, this is not uncommon, Adam. Many women will start to encounter symptoms of the menopause many months and sometimes years before they've noticed a change in their periods. So it's not, and you know what's really bad about it is, I thought in my utter ignorance, well, this menopause thing, it's not going to happen to me, I haven't had children. And it's probably going to be like this. It's going to be like, I'm going to go to bed one night and I'm going to wake up. And then there's going to be rockets and bunny rabbits and the sun will always shine, because that must be what happens when your fertility ends. Because you go to bed one evening and you just don't have another period. That's what I thought it was going to be like. And oh my goodness, there's a handful of women, I call them the 20% club, who will have little or no symptoms. Let me tell you, I'm outraged by that, only because I'm not in it. But most women out there are going to belong to what I've called the 80% club, which means that they're going to encounter symptoms of the menopause that, if asked the question, is this impacting the quality of my life, will no doubt answer yes. And it's estimated up to 25% of that community will say horrendous, life-changing, but not in a good way.
Yeah.
So, yeah, go on.
No, I was going to say, so about the symptoms. So, I always find that, and, this is for any scenario, if there are a proportion of people who have symptoms and a proportion of people who don't. Let's use the pandemic, okay, for an example, because there were people out there who tested positive and were asymptomatic, and they were like, oh, I've had COVID and it wasn't that bad. What are you moaning about? And I know there are women, because I've met them, who've gone, I just said to myself, I won't go through the menopause, and I never did. And, they're in their late 70s now. And that sort of mindset, that sort of approach can be damaging, can lend towards stigma that people shouldn't be experiencing what they're experiencing. But the Samaritans have data that suggests that the highest rate of suicides in women is between the ages of 45 and 54, I think it is,
Yeah.
which you've just given us as the menopause sort of
Yep.
go-to time frame. So
Oh,
how
yes.
important is it to talk about your symptoms, and how important is it to find that support?
Well, women say all the time, I felt so alone. Now, let's just hear that statement again. I felt so alone. If I've now called it the 100% club, how outrageous is that? That each individual woman feels that they're the only person out there that this stuff is happening to. So my message is, rather than feeling shame, worry, concern, if you flip that statistic on its head, surely that's power and strength. You're in the 100% club. So that is amazing. So, and that's what we've got to do. And the thing is, I feel like the time is absolutely right now, because it's almost like a tsunami, where as soon as you mention it in certain organizations and settings where it's never been talked about before, it's like menopause has been hiding in plain sight for all of these years, but nobody's talked about it. We know we've got an aging workforce. So the fastest growing demographic in the workplace is estimated to be women 50 plus. So you've got women, as soon as you say, it's okay to talk about this, honestly, you get it's almost like an outpouring where women are going, oh my goodness, I thought it was crazy. I thought I had early onset Alzheimer's. Can I talk about it? And I was running sessions. So who would have thunk that you could do you could do all of your work online before COVID? I mean, none of us really did. We didn't know that this world existed, did we? Not really. And I was running sessions last year because all of my work is educating in the workplace. And I say what Miss Menopause is providing is the corporate girl chat, but for everybody. Everybody must come along. Everyone's invited. And I was running these sessions, and there must have been something in the air that particular month, because I ran 3 different sessions to 3 different organizations. And the first time it happened, I have to say, Adam, I said to myself, oh my God, just Sharon, what have you said or what have you done? Because this woman, and especially when you're looking at something like Teams or Zoom, what you see is little tiles of faces, don't you? You see little names, little faces. I don't know who these people are. I don't know their titles. I just see them there. And this particular woman burst into tears on this call. And I was like, oh my goodness, immediately thinking, oh my goodness, Sharon, what have you said? And the reason being was it was out of utter relief. Out of utter relief. And this was a senior person. She said she called herself a director in her organization. And she said she found it was the first safe place that she'd found where she could tell her story and not feel she was being judged. And the relief made her cry. And that happened twice more in that month. And I thought, this is outrageous. It's the 21st century. This just should not be happening.
Yeah, I was about to say, I mean, that's a fantastic response that you can create that safe space for people. But you're right, with 2022, why aren't, and I love your phrase, why isn't the menopause business as usual? So, let's bring it to social care. So the social care sector is predominantly made up of female workers, females who were assigned the sex at birth. And we also have an aging workforce. So if we've got a majority of a workforce who's female and is aging, and we are aware that it doesn't have to be an elderly age, it could be any age from, well, whatever. You've explained this to us already. How do we make sure that our businesses and organizations are proactive to support them? What sort of things do we need to have in place to support the workforce so that they can continue to work? We can make sure that they've got adequate time for appointments, etc. What should we be thinking?
I'll say 3 words, and this is the headline: educate, educate, educate. They are the main things, because 2 things here. I mean, my goodness, health and social care. I'm an absolute fan of health and social care. Who wouldn't be? And all I hear is horror stories about people leaving the profession. You can't recruit people into the profession. So if you've got an aging workforce and all of that expertise, all of that excellence, all of that knowledge, who can ill afford in any profession, never mind the health and social care profession, to lose that talent? And let me tell you what tends to happen here. So I'm going to call it womankind when I'm going to say women, and I'm sure men are as equally as bad, but women are notoriously rubbish at explaining things away and being really particularly rubbish at their own self-care. I think everyone's a bit rubbish at it, to be honest. But I'm going to make this sweeping statement, and let's see if you agree with me, Adam. Would you agree that in the 21st century, it tends to be women who still tend to be the main providers of care within their own families, that they tend to be the majority of care providers. And we know, don't we, that women are having children later in life. So you've almost got this perfect storm of women looking after younger children because they're having children later, maybe teenagers, maybe who hasn't looked after more humans during COVID. You know, we've all tried to look after friends, family, neighbours, etc. Then what tends to happen is in the early stages of menopause, and we'll be very technical here this evening, women wake up one day feeling a bit meh. So I'm feeling a bit anxious. I'm not sleeping very well. I can't remember the name for this. It's a thingy, it's a thingy. I put my keys in the kettle. I don't know why I've gone upstairs. And they know that they're not firing on all cylinders. So they rock up to work, hoping upon hope that nobody notices that they're not feeling 100%. And most women at this point have no idea that what's happening to their minds and their bodies is hormone-related menopause. These are powerful, powerful hormones that make us the reproducing females that we are. And during this time in your life, the term would be at the beginning of this, I like to call it, Adam, when the magic begins, perimenopause.
I was about to say, is this the perimenopause I've read about?
Yeah, so the perimenopause is when, I'm going to call it in very layman's terms, in Sharon terms, when the magic begins. Now, remember, this is when hormones start to shift and decline. But remember, that individual may still be having regular periods over months and years, even though they're presenting with strange and wonderful symptoms. So how on earth are you supposed to connect what's happening there could be this thing here, menopause? We don't know. So like I say, women are coming into work knowing that they're not 100%. And what I'm going to say is my term is hiding away in corners. So that, you know, you could look at me and go, oh, Sharon, you're not a bad talker. I'd like you to go and present some of this to our senior team. And I'm going, hey, name. That's how bad it can be. I can't even remember my own name some days. And one of my stories is I had the same laptop and the same password for over 6 years at the time. Came down, switched the machine on, couldn't remember the password. And I don't know why opening and shutting the lid would help, but I did that several times now. You know, it's going to come to me. It's going to come to me. I had to stop work that day because I could not recall my password. The day after, switched it back on, it was back. Where it had gone, I have absolutely no idea. That is not uncommon. So at the very worst, women are hiding away in corners, hoping you're not going to notice them. Almost what I describe, Adam, as reversing away from opportunities. But at the very, very worst case scenario, women are coming into work, putting 2 and 2 together, coming up with 46. You might have heard friends, family, colleagues say things like, I've lost my confidence. I just can't do that anymore. And I would say from all of the people I've met, the stories that I've heard, usually within less than 6 months, especially for those individuals who've been in position for more than 12 months. Because after 12 months, especially, and I would imagine in your profession, people have got an element, long lengths of service. So they've got a direct comparison between what their capabilities are, what they're good at. You get into a workflow and a stride, don't you? So those individuals are going, I can't remember my own name. I can't remember that. I feel terrible. I can't do it anymore. I think I've lost my confidence. And usually within less than 6 months, they have left. They are walking away out of what I'm describing as utter ignorance, because nobody's told us about this life event known as menopause, because it wasn't taught in schools. So I'm going to say, well, I'm going to tell you about a secret thing called the girl chat at school. Now, the girl chat seems to have been a postcode lottery up and down the country. So if I have asked that question, who had the girl chat? Some will say they did and some will. I would say if there's any men on my calls, the day you came in for double maths and you were sent out to play football was probably the day the girl chat was taking place. That's probably what was happening. That's what happened in my school. All the boys were sent out to do gorgeous things. And all the 10 and 11-year-olds were herded into the big classroom. And then I was told I was going to bleed every month for 30 plus years. I was like, you have got to be joking me. And then I was showed this contraption. I can only describe it. It's called a Dr. White's belt, Adam. You won't probably have a clue what I'm talking about. For you or any listeners, please feel free to Google it. Think of a hammock. Think of a belt that a Victorian woman might have also been terrified of. And that was utterly terrifying. But the point that I want to make is the biggest stressor I had was, what was I going to wear at the school disco? And was I going to get my French homework done on time? But at least somebody had told me about the changes to my young body. Now in the 21st century, we've got things like gender pay gap, pension pay gap, we've got AD&I initiatives, we've got wellbeing, mental health initiatives. Women are being actively encouraged to take on more and more responsibility and accountability. Quite rightly so, absolutely. And then this life event called menopause comes along for most women in their mid-40s and makes them think they've got early onset Alzheimer's, makes them think they can't do their job anymore, and they are leaving out of utter ignorance. So I often say, you know, a service like mine, it shouldn't really be needed. It shouldn't be needed because we should learn about this stuff as young people in, you know, at school. But right now they've got what I would describe as a void of ignorance. So most women out there have literally no idea what's happening to them. Could be menopause related. And as you know, quite rightly said earlier, my mission is to educate everybody. And some of the most profound feedback I've had over the years has been from men who, quite rightly so, will probably think, looking at the subject, oh my goodness, that's not for me. That's not a topic that I need to know about. But what I'll say is us women, we're insidious. We're everywhere. There's no escape. And we're currently making up 50.6% of the population. Oh, just saying. So yeah, we're either going to be colleagues, friends, family members of yours. You know, if you're a heterosexual man, you're probably going to end up living in quite close quarters with what might be will be ultimately a menopausal woman. So when I've got feedback like this, Adam, where men are telling me, do you know what? Learning about this stuff is probably going to help to save my marriage. My question to any employer of choice would be, why on earth would you choose not to educate everybody about this life event? Because look how far we've come with, number one, the disclosure of pregnancy, and yet 100% of reproducing females won't become parents. Next thing is mental health and well-being. Who hasn't, in the last 2 years, picked up the mantle about mental health and well-being? Absolutely, the absolutely right thing to be doing. What I say all the time is, I hope and I wish that the smallest percentage of any population would suffer from, let's call it mental ill health. Any guesses at what you think the number one mental health symptom reported to me is most often?
I wouldn't be able to hazard a guess. An inability to sleep.
Well, that's really up there. But anxiety, closely followed by brain fog. And what I mean by brain fog is can't remember my own name, can't remember my password, can't remember. I know what that is, but I can't tell you what it is today. Can't recall that name. So if you think about it, for the very first time in a woman's life who might have never described herself as mentally different, mentally changed, mentally unwell, because of the power of our shifting and declining hormones, menopause, women believe they've got early onset Alzheimer's and they are leaving. So what I'm here to say to any organisation out there, if you think you've got mental health, well-being, AD&I initiatives covered, and you are not including menopause, you've got a huge hole, because it's 100% of reproducing females. But indirectly, what I'm saying is 100% of people out there will come into contact with menopause, either directly or indirectly. And I say this all the time, learning about menopause can't harm you at all, but it could really, really help you.
Yeah. And I suppose for me, the concern would be, listening to all the symptoms that you've just explained now as well, is if you haven't got that open culture within your organization, if you haven't got that ability to talk about it and discuss it, if your organization is, as it's referred to, snowy white peaks and is all male, then your senior leadership isn't going to be talking about the menopause. I have a concern that someone's performance may be unfairly judged based on the symptoms that they're having with the menopause, and we need to be able to have that open conversation. I mean, we've got a resident HR expert, Sonia Ryan. I'd love to know what employment law says about being able to ask people, you know, how they're getting on with the menopause. Should we be asking our employees, you know, are you getting all the support that you need? Is there a line that we can't cross?
Well, menopause is indirectly covered by the Equality Act 2010. So under the headings of the three of them, age, sex and disability, menopause can sit under those umbrella headings. Now, it doesn't have its own, what would be described as its own protected characteristic. But the very first tribunal that was ever won and brought in the UK, it's a few years ago now, was won and brought on the basis of disability. Now, I don't know anybody out there, Adam, who wants to be classed as disabled going through the menopause. But menopause truly is the gift that keeps on giving. And it can go on for years and years and years. So technically, anybody whose work is impeded by a condition or an event could technically fall under that umbrella heading of disability. Like I say, the first case around menopause was one and brought on that basis. My philosophy is, let's not let it get that far. Let's make this a business as usual conversation where I say things like, surely, Adam, we should be able to say things like hand, foot, vagina, penis in a sentence without going, oh, and having an attack of the vapors. We're adults. Surely we can have adult, open conversations. So if we all understand that this is a life event that no one woman can opt out of, you cannot stop this. What you will have is 20% of the population won't have any ill effects from their fertility ending, which means the majority will. And bearing that in mind, commercially, as an organisation and employer, would you want your talent to walk out of the door because of ignorance? Can you afford for that to happen? So what I'm saying is it's about opening up the conversation. So culturally, you have to be ready to do that, of course. But, all women want us to be enabled to work through this life event and get out the other side. And surely all employers want to do is to retain their talent. So why would you not go there? But I mean, I say all the time, Adam, it's low cost, no cost solutions that organizations have to think about. So let's go back to the disclosure of pregnancy. Now, every organization out there, because of law, will have a beautiful process policy around the disclosure of pregnancy. That absolutely will be happening out there. I'm not saying it's perfect, but I'm saying there is a process for that. So if I was to disclose a pregnancy, I'm sure beautiful things would happen in many organizations. I might get a car parking space near the office door. I might get time off for appointments. I might get access to a window that opens. I might get a workstation assessment. You might do a uniform review. And what I'm saying is organizations need not to think, like I call it a leadership eye rule, where you don't want managers or leaders going, another thing I've got to think about. What I'm saying is all of that stuff there, all of that good stuff that you know about in your small reasonable adjustment toolkit, you can take it out once you've understood the subject matter of menopause and apply it. So we're not reinventing the wheel here. This is not loads and loads of new stuff that we've got to think about. All we've got to do is remember what's in our toolkits. You've probably done stuff through mental health and well-being. You'll have done stuff before if you were a leader. Now you've understood the subject better. Can you see the world through what I'm calling a menopause lens? A menopause lens. And I think that's a really good way to look at it. So, for example, very early on when I set up Miss Menopause, nearly 4 years ago now, I went to an organisation that shall remain nameless. And the woman was the CEO, which was brilliant. I thought, I'm going to have a great conversation here. And the response was this. She went, well, we don't have any issues with menopause in our business. I went, do you not? She went, no one's ever talked about this. No one's ever told me people are ill, sick, or we've lost people because of menopause. I went, right, okay. I said, I'm going to bet you £1 million Geordie pounds that you have got no way of recording that it's not part of any conversation or HR system or process that you've got here. Now, I said, don't feel bad because it's 4 years ago, because at the time, less than 3% of companies were even thinking of talking about menopause at that point. She went, no, that won't be true. We definitely do that. Now, I'm not lying to say that I'm right a lot, but guess who was right? It wasn't there. And neither was it going to be, because it hadn't really been thought about. So it's simple things like, if you're doing a return to work, best practice might be treat menopause like it could eventually become, well, it's part of that Equality Act, as in a disability, for example. You might treat that as best practice. And you might say that if anyone's reporting menopause symptoms, you don't count that as times of absence. You work with that individual. But the other message for me is, if you educate everybody, not just leaders, but everybody joins in the conversation. What I say to anybody who's a non-manager in that organisation, now your organisation could end up providing you with the most beautiful, gorgeous, no-cost, low-cost solutions to menopause through their processes, through their policies, whatever that might be. But let me tell you, menopause doesn't just begin as you open up your laptop or you walk through the office door. Sadly, it will be with you for 24 hours a day. So I'd like to think nobody's spending 24 hours a day, 7 days a week at work. So you'll be leaving work, you'll be on holiday, and ultimately you will be retiring from that workplace. So unless you join in, and this is my personal opinion, I always believe that my line manager and my organisation surely shouldn't care more about me than me. So if it's not an equal active partnership, how is it ever really, really going to work? So it's really, really important. But things like that, workstation assessments, another crazy thing, let me tell you this story. So again, not long after I'd set up, long before COVID was a thing, I was going on site to run some sessions at this particular organisation. And a woman kind of came running over. She went, Sharon, I'm so pleased you're here because I think I'm going through the menopause and I get really hot. Hot sweats, night sweats, really quite common symptoms of menopause, probably the ones we've most commonly heard about. So just get really, really hot. So she said, I've asked for a fan. Now that does not sound unreasonable, does it? I said, well, no, that doesn't sound unreasonable. She went, but my line managers checked the policy and I can only have one if I'm pregnant. I said, oh, right, okay. She said, so I've asked if I can bring my own in and I was told no because it's not PAT tested. So we've got to get away, right? Isn't that crazy? From these silos of that belongs in that box and that belongs in that box and that sits over there. Menopause cuts across everything. Well-being, AD&I, it's commercially a reason that you'd want your people to be educated around, because it's, what I say is menopause is not more or less important, in my opinion, than any other initiative you've got for your people. What's different about it is the scale. It's 100%. So I keep saying that, it's 100%.
I was just thinking about, because obviously I'm coming and looking at this selfishly in a purely social care lens, and I'm looking at this and thinking of the sector. And when you were talking about, and when we spoke before we went live, we were talking about how the menopause isn't just with you at work; it's when you go home. However, there is a growing industry at the moment within social care of 24-hour living carers.
Okay.
And those are people who live in 24 hours at someone's house. And I don't have any statistics, but through personal experience, the demographic of living carers is predominantly non-white, non-UK citizens, because it suits their needs at that time and place. And I have read somewhere that there can be more severe symptoms in Black ethnic and Latino backgrounds. And I just want to say, if you're a living care provider listening to this today, which, why wouldn't anyone in social care not be listening to the #1 social care chat show? But this is something you really need to consider in living care scenarios as well, because social care is demanding at the best of times and at the worst of times. Now, imagine going through that, and as you've said, Sharon, feeling alone. It must be incredible. So there has to be, for those 24-hour scenarios, a better avenue of support.
Well, some cultures don't even have words to describe menopause, and you're absolutely right. And for me, every day is a school day. I'm a white Geordie lass. That's my lens. I'm constantly trying to hook up with people in this space who tell me their stories, and that's the thing. No one person's going to have all the answers. But if you have a culture of openness, where people can share their personal stories. Remember, each and every person, whichever group, ethnic or otherwise they belong to, will have a menopause like themselves. So you're going to learn so much from your people, but you have to have that culture. So again, it's simple things like you might have an intranet site where people can share their stories. Because remember, because menopausal women are like live living experiments, I'll go onto the internet site and go, oh my goodness, I've been trying this sage leaf tablet stuff. Now, let me tell you, I did try sage leaf tablets, Adam. This is a very early on when I was having my symptoms, because my most untenable symptom was the inability to sleep. And the thing is, with sage leaf, after 2 weeks of taking it, all I felt was sick, because all I could taste was sage and onion stuff and repeating back vile of horrible. Now, some women are going to go, oh my goodness, that was amazing for me. That's what's really difficult. So I go, a bit like me with the HRT. I could go, I use this HRT. It's this brand. It's this what I get. I share that because I say within 2 weeks, all of my symptoms went. The next woman comes back. She goes, oh, Sharon, it made me ill. And that's, you're going to learn the most from your people. And so again, lots of organizations, they say you belong to the LGBTQ plus community, equality, diversity. There's lots of these types of focus groups or talking groups springing up. This can be the same. This doesn't have to be a group on its own. You could have a women's network. You could have a whatever network. Like I keep saying, it's not about reinventing the wheel. It's about having a place where this becomes a place where it can be learned about, talked about, and shared. And your people will help you to understand what best practice will look like for them, because you just have to ask them. You have to say within reason. So Also, if my line manager, if we were having this open, honest conversation, I hope what would happen is we'd have this open, honest conversation, because you've said it yourself, Adam, it's about the culture. Do I trust this individual? Is it safe to share without judgment? Those things have to be in place for anything. It's not just a menopause thing. It has to happen for anything. So say I disclose my menopause and I'm talking about symptoms. Best practice wouldn't be, are you menopausal? I think you are. This is what you need to do. That would not be best practice. So you would ask open-ended questions. You would hear my story. And at some point, you might say, as my line manager, and I'm always fascinated when I work with leaders, because hardly anyone remembers to do this. I always say, why don't you ask the person what would help them within reason? Now, you might have to say a caveat within reason, because if you say, well, Sharon, what might help you? I'm like, well, hey, Adam, I'd like champagne delivered every hour on a silver platter for the next 7 days. Now, obviously, that's not particularly reasonable. So you're going to have to say, it might be, again, the restrictions might be, we don't have any money to spend right now on this. But what would be your business caveats that you'd say within reason? It can't cost money, etc., whatever the caveats you want to make. What might help you? And you might say, can I be next to a window that opens? It could be that simple. Do you know what I mean? So we haven't got to build this up into the size of a mountain that it's totally scary. For women who can't talk about it, that's the most scary thing, because they think they've got early onset Alzheimer's, they think they're on their own and they're leaving your business. That's surely more scary than not talking about it.
I mean, we had, two things here. I mean, for those who might not have access to create an intranet or have that sort of infrastructure in your workplaces, menopause WhatsApp group. Just start a WhatsApp group. Have a menopause champion within your company who's going through it. Let them admin the WhatsApp group. It's a safe space for women to go to and go, oh, I've tried this. Isn't it amazing? Easy to share links, really accessible. And it's end-to-end encrypted. So it's a no-brainer. Every organization, get yourself a menopause WhatsApp group. But then I'm just thinking about what you were saying then. We discussed this when I chatted to Mike Adams and Kira Lawrence, Purple Tuesday and MenCap respectively, about making adaptions within the workplace and actually giving people options as well first. So it's not a case of I'm reacting because I don't know what to do here. It could be a case of, like you say, if you need to move your chair, that's fine. If you need to have more access to this, that's fine. If you want to split your lunch break up into 4 separate breaks during the day, that's fine. If none of that is suitable, what else might be able to benefit you with these caveats in mind? Because then at least we are showing people we're understanding, aren't we?
That you care. That you care. And remember, absolutely, what is wrong with saying is, as part of those conversations, but hey, Sharon, what are you intending to do about that too? So if I've told you, so for example, some quite common triggers of menopause can be things like caffeine, spicy food, alcohol, for example. So keeping things like a food and drink diary can be really helpful. So if I've disclosed that to you, Adam, as my line manager, and every time you walk past my desk, I'm sitting with my head in a vat of coffee, and then I'm going, oh my goodness, I can't work because the flushes are terrible. Then I think you have every right to get a bit professionally grumpy, because I have to take some ownership and accountability for myself, surely, don't I? So this is what I keep saying all of the time. It has to be an equal active partnership. No one party should be doing all of the work, because otherwise it's never going to work. Everyone has to join in. Yes, organizations absolutely have a duty of care, and your line manager does, but the ultimate care, surely, in my opinion, should sit with us. Because, and the phrase that I'm going to use, Adam, is a bit like the advert, because you're worth it. Because you're worth it. And you know what? I think a lot of women don't ever, I would say most humans are pretty rubbish at self-care. So it's about, and if the menopause is the gift that truly keeps on giving, on average, symptoms can last, and we were touching upon this before, weren't we? 5 to 7 years. 10 years is not uncommon. 10 years is not uncommon. Now, I've met women in their 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s who will still say, I am being impacted by menopausal symptoms. So what I'm saying is, I'm going to be really quite brutal when I say this. I don't want anyone out there to choose, and I'm using my language very carefully here, choosing to become what I call a victim of the menopause, because it truly is the gift that keeps on giving. Now, the work that I do, I'm going to explain what your options are to help you manage a menopause, but doing nothing shouldn't be one of them. That is one of my key messages.
Just before you go on to that, and again, this is where I have to strongly say that these views are mine and no one else's. And you're right, we have to be careful with the words we choose because we don't want to belittle anyone's experiences.
Absolutely not.
But I am a firm believer. My partner is a holistic spiritual therapist, so does a lot of inner learning, self-learning, addressing childhood traumas and everything like that. And I get that bad things can happen and things can be terrible, but we as a society find it really easy, and this is probably going to be one of the most controversial things I say on this show, and I say it repeatedly. As a society, we find it really easy to slip into a victim mentality. And this is wrong. I can't cope. Someone needs to fix it for me.
Sure.
And yes, there are situations that are out of our control. But as individuals, with the right support, with the right networks, with the right education for our peers, with the right cultures around us, we can be the strongest people we know. And there has to be some accountability and personal responsibility where the capacity allows and where the position allows for it. We as a society need to get to a place where we can empower people to be able to own themselves and to be able to have those conversations. And there's a lot that needs to be done, but you're right, some accountability needs to be taken into place. But as providers, we need to be asking ourselves, have we done enough to empower them? Have we done enough to make them feel like they've got those options?
Absolutely.
So yes, we might say to people, you need to be accountable, but that accountability goes two ways. And as an employer, have you done enough?
And remember, I'm saying 50-50. It can't be employer does all the work, person does nothing, and absolutely person trying to do their very best, and employers going, well, I'm not interested. Absolutely 50-50 partnership. 100%, it has to be like that. Otherwise, it's never going to work. It's just not going to work. And there's tons of things that women can do. So I think, Davina's program was on just last night, and some of the feedback I'm getting is women still feeling like, oh, is HRT the only option? No, it isn't the only option. There's tons of options out there. I say, if you wanted to dangle crystals for your nipples and it works for you, who cares? It's your body, your choice.
Who told you I get up to on a Saturday night?
Well, I wouldn't like to say. I wouldn't like to say. But you know what I mean? I know that sounds ridiculous, but the point I'm making is it's your body. It belongs to you. It does brilliant things for you every single day. If you notice something that is different about you and your body, whether that's mentally or physically, I hope you love, care, and respect yourself enough to want to do something about it. Whatever that might be. We're talking about menopause. Remember, menopause symptoms may begin many years and often months before anyone's periods might change. So how are you supposed to know it's menopause related? Well, you might not, but what you might say to yourself is, this isn't right for me in my body. There's something changed here that I don't like. It's impacting the quality of my life. So I love, care, and respect myself enough to do something about that. And that's what you do. And so there's no right or wrong here for anything around menopause. There's only what's right for you. And I'm always fascinated. I'm going to share this story that I kind of shared earlier on. So I was on a group a couple of weeks ago, and this is what happens all of the time. Somebody had said on the group, I am bleeding so much, I cannot get out of bed. Is this normal? I'm like, come on. Have you not just answered your own question? But really often people, especially women I seem to meet, are looking for validation. I go, Sharon, is this normal? I'm like, is this normal for you? And 9 times out of 10, it isn't normal for them. So my response is, what do you need to do about that? So we've got to stop trying to look for validation because maybe we're a bit scared or we're a bit concerned or we don't know what's really happening. But remember, you're in the 100% club. And every woman out there, reproducing female, is going to encounter this. So what's brilliant now is there are podcasts like this. You can read books. There's books being written nearly every week. I say a new book coming out. There's groups. I know I've got this group. There's groups out there. You are not alone and you are not the only person. But it's not going to be easy for some of the listeners out there. It's going to take absolute trial and error. And some of you might feel exhausted from trying. But the brilliant news is that in the last 4 years, I've never met a woman yet who said, Sharon, I've tried everything and none of it's worked. I haven't met that person yet. So, there's tons of things that women can do. The herbal route. I mentioned that I was trying sage leaf tablets and they just made me feel sick. But, magnesium, because I wasn't sleeping, I read that magnesium to me was a wonder drug. Magnesium, you can eat it, you can wear it, and you can bath in this stuff. And let me tell you, Adam, I was doing all three. And it worked a little bit, but it didn't really work much at all in the end. So I had to keep going and going. And again, another heartbreaking thing is, I might say it to people out there, what have you tried? And they go, I tried sage leaf. How did you get on? Oh, it didn't work. What are you doing now? I'm just getting on with it. Remember, up to a third of your life now in menopause, as in your fertility's ended. Symptoms, 5 to 7 years, 10 years isn't uncommon. Somebody once told me that humans tend not to age more well. I don't know if you believe that, but we tend not to age more well. So me personally, my personal opinion is at the age of nearly 54, I probably believe that I have lived longer than I will live. And nobody knows how long that will be, least of all me. But I don't want to waste another moment or another day. So I don't want women out there thinking, oh my goodness, menopause, that's it, my life's older, I'm now old, I can't go on holiday, I can't go swimming, I've got to leave my job, I can't do all these things. So what I'll say about me personally is, whilst I can say the menopause nearly killed me, because I fell asleep at the wheel of my car at speed because I was only sleeping for a maximum of 2 hours a night. That was my most untenable symptom. So the menopause could have killed me. It took me 18 months of trial and error to eventually decide that HRT was worth a go. And remember, within 2 weeks, solved all of my problems. But that was me. I'm me, and it may not work like that for anyone else. And all I can say is at the age of nearly 54, my life is at least as good, if not in some parts better, than it was before menopause began. So I don't want anybody out there thinking, oh my goodness, that's it, it's all over. I can't do what I used to do. Remember, it's not going to be easy for some of the people out there, but I truly believe that you will find the right solution. And organizations, if you're not talking about menopause and you're not incorporating it into your mental health, well-being, ED&I structures and process, commercially, you are going to be less profitable because your talent is going to wake up one day and go, can't do this. Or maybe they even know that it's menopause, but culturally, they feel afraid to talk about this for fear of, of judgment. I've just been reading that, tribunal cases have gone up by 3 times as much in the last 12 months. So again, I'm saying, can we stop living in a place of fear and can we just make this business as usual? 100%.
Yeah. I mean, hopefully, the most heartbreaking thing for me in this is women feeling alone. And, I'm hoping that with networks like Miss Menopause and, there are many others out there, that sense of being alone will dissipate, that you will meet more people who will go, oh, I understand more about this because I joined this group and it was really supportive. Yeah. I'm in the Miss Menopause Facebook group and it benefited. Yeah. My organization's got a WhatsApp chat that we can all join in and be a part of. And I'm hoping that will become the new future. Just before we finish off, I do want to just have a quick chat about missmenopause.co.uk. You said you've been doing it 4 years now. Yeah. What's on your website? What will people get from visiting it? And why did you start it?
Well, I started because I was a really angry, perimenopausal woman. So my philosophy was I'd been a senior leader in a FTSE 100 company. I thought I was pretty smart. I thought I was streetwise. I thought I knew a lot of things about a lot of things. And then this weird and wonderful stuff started to happen to me. I wasn't sleeping through the night. I was getting really hot. I was having night terrors. These were my initial early symptoms. I didn't know they were menopause related because the only things that most women have ever been told about, if they've heard of anything, is hot flushes. And even then, nobody tells you can't escape your body. And there've been times, Adam, where I would have easily ripped my top open and tried to put my boobs against a cold window, which, let's be honest, would not be appropriate in the workplace. But yeah, I set it up because I personally couldn't find any information at the time that was suitable for me, that I understood, that I got the gist of. And then there was a couple of catalysts. I spent some time with some GPs. I also did some courses. It wasn't part of any of this work, especially things like mental health and well-being. It wasn't part of that. It continues in most cases not to be. And so I just thought I was going to probably have to fold my original business, because my original business, I'm a leadership coach. And because I was so exhausted, I was having to go and lie down in the afternoon. I thought, I can't do this anymore. So what you'll find from me, my philosophy on life and my philosophy in business is all about simplicity. So what I offer organizations is a really simple, no nonsense to get people to be motivated, inspired, to learn about menopause so they can become personally accountable which also and also to enable organisations to just help their workforce work through this life event and get out the other side. So, you know, I always say to organisations out there, if you're looking for somebody incredibly corporate, incredibly straight-laced, I'm not your woman. but if you want somebody who's going to bring a bit of humour, a bit of energy and passion into the subject, that's, you know, I'm living. I never thought I would do this. You know, I didn't have a plan. This was not on my agenda. Somebody said, Sharon, you're going to get passionately involved with the menopause. I would have said, don't be ridiculous. That's got nothing to do with me. But it changes lives, you know. And I was on a call just last week, and one of the HR people came on, because I'm doing quite a bit of sessions, a few sessions with this organisation. And they came on to say, Sharon, in the last 2 weeks following your session, 2 women have come to me and said they've been to see their GP, they've now got some HRT, and they couldn't be more delighted. And that's what this is all about. Empowering, enabling individuals to get what they need, you as an employer, enabling them to have what they need. So they're just doing the best job for you. They're living their best life. Surely that's all everybody wants.
Yeah. Spot on. I mean, I've learned tons tonight. I mean, you know, I have a family full of females. You know, my mum has experienced it, so I've vicariously experienced it. Luckily, I was out the house by the time it happened. I say that quite patronizingly because my mum then had to cope with just being her and her husband, and I wish that I could have done more for it. But this evening really has shone a light, for me especially, on the menopause and the scenarios around it and how we can support people better. I hope it starts a larger conversation. I know there is work out there going on at the moment to support our workforces further. I would love to have a chat with you after this call, if that's okay, quickly.
Yeah.
But Sharon, thank you so much for joining me this evening. You are Sharon MacArthur, Miss Menopause. www.missmenopause.co.uk. And if you take anything away from tonight's show, please just take away the fact that it's 100% of women. 100% of women. It's the 100% club. Have I got that right?
Yes, 100%. Absolutely.
Next week, on next week's episode, we are going to be discussing career pathways and awareness within social care. We have got 4 people joining us next week, each bringing their own story of where they started in social care and where they've ended up today. And I'm, you know, spoiler alert, I think we've only got 1 registered manager joining us, and they've all had diverse careers in social care. So the whole myth that it's care assistant, senior, deputy, registered manager, wrong. We are going to disprove that next week in the next week's episode. The week after that, our usual show on the 17th of May will not be happening. Mark and I are going to be at the Health Plus Care Show at the London Excel. So we are excited to be having our first ever live broadcast, live audience show at the London Excel. So if you are coming down, it's on May 19th, 10:30 at the London XL. Come and join us, and we will be having a catch-up episode on the Friday that week, just letting you all know how it went. So until then, thank you very much for listening. Thank you so much for joining me, Sharon, and we will see you all soon. Take care.
Thank you. Cheers. Bye.